Say, please subscribe. Say, like this video.
Bye-bye.
How's it going, everyone? Coach Javi here with the Next Goal Wins TV. Big matches this weekend. We're going to start with this pre-match preview of the Manchester City versus Newcastle match. That's going to happen at the Etihad on Saturday morning. And you guys already know, if you guys have been watching the channel, this is the place to go if you want the pre-match previews, but then if you also want the post-match tactical analysis and post-match thoughts as well. As usual, we're going to break this one down into a couple different segments: league standings, current form, injuries, predicted lineups, and then the predicted score. So that's how we always break down these pre-match previews. Let's start with this one, Manchester City and Newcastle. We're going to start with the league standings. This is why this makes it such an interesting match, because you got Manchester City in 5th and Newcastle United in 6th place, both on 41 points and with plus 13 goal differential. So whoever wins this match does have the potential to move into the top 4, depending on the Chelsea and Brighton match that's going to happen on Friday. Obviously, I'm recording this video beforehand, so we won't know until after this video is out. However, this is the interesting part about both of these teams. Manchester City, everyone's talking about how bad they are this season, how inconsistent, how terrible they are. On the other hand, you got Newcastle. Everyone's talking about how good they've been, how dangerous they've looked, how they've made Arsenal look terrible, and they're basically even when it comes to the points. The other thing, just to show you how far apart Liverpool is from Newcastle, Liverpool is 16 points ahead of Newcastle. So for both of these teams, it's pretty clear that the title race is over, but they're both looking to finish in the top 4. Newcastle United looking to get back into the top 4 like they were a couple years ago and get back to European football. Not just European football, but Champions League. I do have a feeling that between Manchester City and Newcastle United, only one of them is going to finish top 4. I don't think both of them are going to finish outside the top 4, but one of them is for sure. So let's look at Manchester City's current form. They just got off that pretty crazy loss and very wildly entertaining match against Real Madrid 3-2. Before that, they beat Leyton Orient 2-1 in the FA Cup. They got smacked by Arsenal 5-1, absolutely demolished. And then they had that match where they beat Club Brugge 3-1 to get into the knockout stages of the Champions League. And then before that, they beat Chelsea 3-1. I did a full tactical analysis on a couple of these matches, actually. So 3 wins, 2 losses in their last 5 matches. As for Newcastle, same thing, 3 wins, 2 losses. They just beat Birmingham City in the FA Cup 3-2 with a mix of an A and B team, but to be honest, a little bit more of a B team. They beat Arsenal 2-0 convincingly. They lost to Fulham 2-1. They beat Southampton 3-1, and then they lost to Bournemouth 4-1. And Bournemouth has been absolutely destroying some teams lately. So relatively even when it comes to their last few results as far as their form. However, you can say that Newcastle feel a lot more confident coming into this match just because some of the big losses that Manchester City has had in their past few matches. And I think specifically the recent result against Arsenal is going to have Newcastle believing that they can go to the Etihad and they can definitely get more than just 1 point. They're going to go for all 3 for sure. That's the beautiful thing about Newcastle and Eddie Howe. They're never going in to try and draw a game. They're always going in to get all 3 points for sure. For sure, they're going to high press City. We already know that. And so this is where it gets interesting. The injured players. As for Manchester City, Jack Grealish only lasted a little bit of the first half in their last match against Real Madrid before going down with a groin injury. Akanji also went down. Oscar Bob's been out for a while and Rodri's been out for a while as well. So you're not going to have any 4 of those players. As for Newcastle, this is where Eddie Howe is going to have to get creative with his lineup, and we'll talk about predicted lineups in a second. But Dan Burn, muscle injury, he's not going to be back until late February. Harvey Barnes and Sven Botman are doubtful, and depending on whether Botman is going to be able to play, I think is going to decide a lot as far as the formation. And then Joe Wellington and Lascelles are definitely going to be out for this match. So both teams with a couple of injuries. Newcastle definitely on the worst end of it because the players that they have injured, specifically the center backs, is going to force them to make a lot of changes, where Manchester City, it's pretty straightforward player for player that they're going to have to replace. And again, guys, remember, I try and do these 2 or 3 days before the match just so it gives everyone enough time to watch the video. Sometimes a lot of things can happen in those 2 or 3 days. If you guys are watching this like the day before the game or the day of the game, there's probably already been some changes as far as players getting injured in training or some players coming back earlier than expected. So give me a little bit of a break if I get some of these predictions or some of these injured players wrong. So now with all of the injuries out of the way, let's get into the predicted lineups. I do see quite a few changes for both teams. We'll start with Manchester City because they're the home team, and right away we have to talk about the goalkeepers. Ederson making some crucial mistakes that I think led to both of the Real Madrid goals at the end that ended up causing Manchester City the win. He's been going back and forth between Ortega and Ederson. I thought he was just kind of benching Ederson more so because they were on a losing streak and they weren't performing really well. Not necessarily because of his performances, but I felt like he needed to change something something up. And now it's pretty clear to me that Pep is not really sure what's going to happen with the goalkeepers and who his number one is. I do think after that performance from Ederson, you have to go back to Ortega. So I think he's going to start Ortega. Now that Akanji's out with an injury, Nunez slips back out on the right, Diaz and Ake in the middle, and Vardiol, who's been playing really well actually. He's probably been the best defender, and just because he's been more of an attacking player than a lot of the Manchester City players further up the field, I think he gives them both dimensions from the defending to the attacking, and he's not going anywhere. So he's going to start on the left. It's interesting that he went with Stones instead of Kovacic the other day against Real Madrid. That one can go either way. I think it might be Kovacic. I just went with Stones. I think he'll have Silva there as well. Foden on the right, Marmoush in the middle, Doku on the left, and Haaland up top. So this is the way that they're going to draw it in the pre-match graphics on television, FootMob, SofaScore. This is what it really looks like when they're in possession. So they play with a back two. That's how they build. They'll tuck in Vardiol and Nunez to help Stones. Stones will be more of a true six, and then that'll allow Silva to push up a little bit higher into more of an attacking position. Phil Foden and Jeremy Doku will then push out really wide, which will allow Marmoush to kind of slip in there with Erling Haaland to have two center forwards plus the wide players. That way, from Ruben Diaz or Nathan Ake, if they can't find one of the three players who've tucked into the middle, they'll go straight out wide to Phil Foden or Jeremy Doku. I do think with the game being against Newcastle, Pep Guardiola is going to want to go with some more dynamic attacking players. I think Kevin De Bruyne has been looking a little bit old recently, if I'm being honest, so I think having Marmoush underneath Haaland, someone who can make more forward runs and is a little bit quicker, a little bit more dangerous in the attack, that's going to make more sense to bring in Marmoush. And then Savinho has not been great, so I think Jeremy Doku is due for a start. Anytime he gets the ball, he wants to go 1v1, he wants to go 1v2 at times, so I think him going at that Newcastle back line, which is going to be a little different than usual, I think Pep Guardiola is going to opt for that instead of a more tactically aware or a more positional player like Savinho. I think Doku is going to need a little bit more freedom, and that's exactly what Pep's going to give him in order for them to be a little bit more dangerous in this game. I think as for Newcastle, it's going to be quite interesting what they end up deciding to do because they have two center backs who are potentially out. Sven Botman is doubtful. I'm not sure if he's going to be back in time, and so against Arsenal, they played with a back three and they had the wing backs. Against Manchester City, I think they're going to have to go with a more traditional back four. So I think they'll go Trippier on the right, Schär and Kraft as the two center backs, and Hall out on the left, Tonali as the six, Joe Willock and Bruno in front of him, and then Murphy, Isak, and Gordon up top. I think when they played with the back three and the wing backs against Arsenal, they still had that front three, so they really only had two players in the middle, and it was Bruno and Tonali. Now that they have to go with a back four, I think they have to bring in someone into the midfield. I know Joe Willock plays typically more as a winger, but I think when it's between him, Longstaff, or Miley, I think he's the better player. He played in that central midfield position against Arsenal in the first leg, if I'm not mistaken, a few months ago. So Eddie Howe has put him there, and I think he's been playing really well. It's a good way for him to stay on the field while also keeping Murphy, Isak, and Gordon on the field at the same time. I still think that gives you a really dynamic midfield three, and at the same time doesn't disrupt the confidence and the chemistry that they've been building with Murphy, Isak, and Gordon up top. And I think Newcastle is definitely a little bit harder to predict than Manchester City just because of some of the injuries and some of the ways that they have to move players around. So let me know, guys, in the comment section down below what you guys think as far as the lineups, who's going to play. Did I miss anyone big that you guys think is probably going to start over another player on the roster? Just let me know in the comment section down below. Before we get into my predicted score, just remember that anybody who correctly predicts the score for this match in the comment section down below will win some Next Goal Wins TV stickers as well as some Champion Grind grip socks provided by my boy Georgie over at Champion Grind. So now let's get into my predicted score. Based off of where the teams are at, how they've been playing, the fact that it is at Manchester City kind of changes things a little bit, but it doesn't change it too much. I'm going to go and say that because Newcastle are right now in really good form with a good mindset and they're going at teams and they're confident, I think given the last few matches, Manchester City have looked really shaky at the back. Newcastle have looked really dangerous up front. I'm going to go ahead and say that Newcastle are going to beat Manchester City 2-1 at the Etihad. Alexander Isak, I got shit for this because I just threw out a number last time and I said, oh, he's worth upwards of 80 million. I'll be honest, guys, I remember when 80 million was like a crazy amount. And in my head, it's still hard to process the fact that Alexander Isak, he's a world-class striker. Don't get me wrong. But anyone in general is worth $150 million. Like for me, that's still crazy to process because I'm still used to when Ronaldo was 100 mil when he went from Manchester to Real Madrid. I don't know. I thought that was going to be a record fee for decades to come. The fact that Alexander Isak is worth $150 million now is just mind-blowing to me. But, however, that's just the way that the market is right now, and based on his performances, that's where he's at. If I was any team in the Premier League right now, Newcastle is probably one of the last teams that I'd want to play against. Honestly, it would be Liverpool, Newcastle, and Bournemouth. Those are the three teams that right now I would try my hardest to avoid. And I'm saying that when you have teams like Manchester Manchester City, Chelsea, and Arsenal. It's a pretty tough moment for Manchester City because these are the games that are going to decide whether they finish in the top 4, and it's also mind-blowing to think that Manchester City might not be in the Champions League next season. They're already obviously 1 foot out of the door right now with a second leg that they still have to play against Real Madrid. If you would have told someone at the beginning of the season that Manchester City would probably not win any trophies or any significant trophies this year, they'd call you crazy. But like I said, I'm confident Newcastle is in a really good spot right now. Manchester City are struggling with their back line. This is going to be a very entertaining match as far as tactics go. I think Newcastle are going to high press. I think City are going to try and play the long ball, knowing that Newcastle is going to high press. They're going to try and isolate Erling Haaland up top and then give him a little bit of support underneath. As long as Newcastle is prepared for the long ball and they high press really well, I see it going in Newcastle's favor 2-1. So if you guys appreciated this video, please go ahead and make sure that you subscribe. Also, check back in a few hours after the match. We'll have a tactical analysis, full breakdown of how it all went down and what happened. And once again, don't forget to give me your score prediction in the comment section down below. If you get it right, you get some free Next Go Wins TV stickers, as well as some Champion Grind grip socks provided by my boy Georgie, who owns Champion Grind. So we've done probably like 6 or 7 of these pre-match previews, and nobody's predicted the correct score yet. So that could be you. Write it down in the comment section down below. That's it for this one, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.